we saw a period starting in May where Trump began to try and put some pressure on Putin. But each time he tried to put pressure, Putin would offer a meeting and Trump would back off on the pressure. And that's essentially what we're seeing right now. Since the meeting in the Oval Office between President Trump and European leaders on August 18, Trump began to build again a coalition to put pressure on the Kremlin. And this continued after a very warm meeting in New York 4 or 5 weeks ago between Zelenskyy and Trump. But as Trump began to talk publicly about providing more advanced weapons to Ukraine, including Tomahawk missiles, Putin called Trump and said, let's have a meeting. And then Trump immediately dropped the idea of putting pressure. So that doesn't mean that this latest turn away from providing pressure is the end point in Trump policy. I suspect once it becomes clear that Putin's not interested in making peace one more time, Trump will come back to the idea of putting pressure on the Kremlin.
Hello and welcome to Indavemedia. I'm Kartul Sharashanidze, and today we are joined by Ambassador John Herbst. He spent decades in the U.S. Foreign Service and served as U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine. Ambassador Herbst, first of all, thank you so much for your time. Let me start with the big picture, like following President Trump's recent White House meeting with President Zelenskyy and his conversation with Vladimir Putin. So, what is your observation and how do you read the President Trump's approach to Russia's war against Ukraine?
Well, the thing is, Trump's mercurial, and the stance he'll take on the war will change over time, but it's also true that there is a certain framework in which it changes over time. He thought he could, solve this war quickly, and obviously he's been unable to do that. There was a period starting in the middle of February where he thought Ukraine was the problem in achieving a peace, and of course that was wrong. And after he made numerous ceasefire proposals, all of which Zelenskyy accepted, and Putin tried to not reject, but he deflected. In other words, he refused to agree. Trump began to realize that Putin was the problem. And we saw a period starting in May where Trump began to try and put some pressure on Putin. But each time he tried to put pressure, Putin would offer a meeting and Trump would back off on the pressure. And that's essentially what we're seeing right now. Since the meeting in the Oval Office between President Trump and European leaders on August 18, Trump began to build again a coalition to put pressure on the Kremlin. And this continued after a very warm meeting in New York 4 or 5 weeks ago between Zelenskyy and Trump. But as Trump began to talk publicly about providing more advanced weapons to Ukraine, including Tomahawk missiles, Putin called Trump and said, let's have a meeting. And then Trump immediately dropped the idea of putting pressure. So that doesn't mean that this latest turn away from providing pressure is the end point in Trump policy. I suspect once it becomes clear that Putin's not interested in making peace one more time, Trump will come back to the idea of putting pressure on the Kremlin. That's kind of how this thing has developed over time.
So what we see now after this meeting with President Zelenskyy at the White House, President Trump said the war should stop where they are, which sounds like he's talking about freezing the front lines, right? So from your perspective, could this kind of solution lead to a just and lasting peace?
Trump has never talked about a just peace. He's talked about a durable peace. And he's been pretty consistent on that. A durable peace along the current lines of battle, a durable peace which involves serious deterrent capability for Ukraine to prevent future Russian aggression. That's what he's been pursuing. And I think he has the ability to achieve this if he's willing to put major pressure on the Russian economy and on the Russian forces on the battlefield in Ukraine. But so far, as we've already discussed, he's been reluctant to do that. But the fact that he is on record seeking this means that it would be a problem for him if he does not effectively pursue this objective. And that's why I think eventually he's going to have to put pressure on Putin.
Ambassador Herbst, for almost 4 years now, Ukrainian leaders have said that any peace deal has to be just and lasting, right? So do you believe their stance has shifted with these latest developments?
My sense is that Zelenskyy would accept a lasting peace as long as it's actually lasting. He wouldn't accept that happily, but given the circumstances, I think he's already indicated a willingness to do this. That would take some explaining in Ukraine, to the people of Ukraine, to the political class in Ukraine. But Ukrainians are not stupid. They understand their circumstances. So I think this is a point that Zelenskyy can sell. But again, it has to be a durable peace. And he needs to have serious deterrent capability. But Putin doesn't want this. Putin has rejected this. Zelenskyy is not.
You mentioned President Trump's shifting positions and statements, right? So how do you read it? What do you make of it?
It's very simple. Trump will entertain very different ideas at different times, and his rhetoric, his public statements reflect that. But again, Trump is on record as saying he wants a durable peace. So there would be a political cost for him in not achieving that durable peace. And I think that would keep him from ultimately allowing Putin to take control of Ukraine.
So Russia says its stance is unchanged after President Trump's ceasefire comments, right? So how do you think Vladimir Putin is reading President Trump's shifting positions?
Well, so far, Putin has been able at critical moments to persuade Trump not to put pressure on him, right? It happened in May when Trump and European leaders were about to put sanctions on Russia. It happened again in August. And as Zelenskyy was coming to Washington to try and make a deal on Tomahawks, it happened a third time now in October. But the fact that Trump keeps coming back to pressuring the Kremlin reflects the fact that Putin is blocking Trump's efforts to achieve peace in Ukraine. And that's not going to go away.
So we might see the next summit between President Trump and President Putin in Budapest, right? So
we might. But first, Lavrov and Rubio need to meet. So that's really the next step.
Right. So what is your expectations?
The only thing I am expecting is Rubio is going to listen very carefully to see if Putin at a summit with Trump in Budapest would offer a serious compromise proposal. So far, we've seen zero serious compromise proposals coming from the Kremlin. If Rubio hears that, then certainly there will be a summit. If he does not hear that, I'm not certain what Trump will do.
So if a Budapest summit takes place, should President Zelenskyy be at the table?
Well, we know Trump would like to see it. We know Putin does not want to see it, and therefore it's not going to happen. But even though Trump saw Putin alone in Alaska and may see Putin alone in Budapest, that doesn't mean that Ukraine is out of the equation. Again, 3 days after Anchorage, you had 7 European leaders, including Zelenskyy, in the Oval Office with Trump. I would not be surprised to see some form of meeting like that after or even before Putin sees Trump in Budapest, if in fact Budapest happens.
And this is my very last question. So do you see any realistic path to peace? And what will be the best outcome for Ukraine, for Europe, and the US? What kind of resolution would you hope to see?
Best outcome would be arming Ukraine to the hilt, allowing them to shoot wherever they want, as long as they don't shoot at Russian civilians, and Ukraine taking back a good part of its territory. If American policy was that strong with our European partners, that would be the result. But Trump's not interested in that, so he's the president, I'm not. A durable peace based upon, again, persuading Putin to stop shooting is an outcome that can be achieved with American strength. If Trump pursues that, that would be a major achievement. Let's see. He is pursuing it. If he pursues it energetically and with strength, he will achieve his goal. Let's see if he's willing to do that.